To be honest, I have no idea what I'm going to be talking about, but I just started talking. I turned on the camera. Um, we're going freestyle today. I've been posting on YouTube for probably like 12. I've had like 13 uploads, 13 to 14 uploads in the past month now. And that is because I have completely detached myself from the outcome. I am just like, dude, I know I'm going to be doing YouTube eventually. Might as well start feeding the algorithm. Just start posting, put the shit out there, get the shit out, basically, as Dan Coe says. And honestly, it's been really liberating because I'm just free to let my thoughts out in a way that I'm still working on trying to bring to social media, my newsletter, to threads and all that sort of stuff, so that I can learn how to so that I can learn how to write, or so that I can learn how to do things better. One thing that biggest thing that I've noticed is that a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people in this space, they become like these kind of like philosophers, self improvement people, and I think that's because in the past, that's how philosophers were. They were active participants in their lives. There wasn't this kind of like disconnect between the intellectuals and then the life and living life, right? Like when you think of philosophers today, you think of people who just kind of close themselves in an office surrounded by a bunch of books and then they just read all day. When that couldn't be further from the well, at least from the true essence of what the philosophers of old used to be, is these guys were the philosophers, the artists, the artisans, the greats of the past were active participants in their life. Look at Leonardo da Vinci. He was like people described him to be as a very strong, very broad man. Plato was really good at wrestling, and he was also known for having really broad shoulders. So a lot of these philosophers, a lot of these intellectuals, a lot of the I mean, fuck Alexander the Great. He was a very well read man, and he was also one of the most excellent commanders and like fighters in history. So the idea that I'm only into books, or no, I'm only into fitness, and you can see it in in American movies too, right? The jocks versus the nerds. There's this kind of like this splintering of the human psyche that we have seen in the past, I don't know, 500, 600, maybe 1,000 years. And what we've seen is that we've lost these pieces of ourselves, and it's not a matter of, oh, I'm this way and I'm fated to be this way for the rest of my life. That couldn't be further from the truth. It's that it's kind of like stories and archetypes. Like when we see a story or we read a story, like I don't mean a fictional story, let's say anime, what we're seeing is like these characters who represent these different aspects of ourselves, right? And you know how when you make a little smiley face on like you could like the human is kind of trained to see faces. So when you once you see, and it could be random in nature, once you see like I don't know two dots and like this like circle thing, you can see a face, right? You even though there's not the face doesn't actually exist in reality. It's just your perception is superimposing this concept of a face onto this little thing that's happening. And that's essentially what a character is. It gives you the illusion of being this living, breathing human being through a mix of voice. It could be the dialogue. It could be the way they move in, if it's a visual medium like movies, the sound, or it could also be just books and your imagination, right? And like their thoughts. And basically, it's the same mechanism that's at playing here. Is like that inherent drive to kind of anthropomorphize everything. Is like you see these words, and suddenly your brain starts creating ideas, and thus you have this concept of a character, of a human that you're creating. Now, where was I going with this? Is we have seen this splintering of ourselves that we've seen in characters, but we know that stories are there for the lessons. But when we start doing this to ourselves, when we start doing this to like our mind, our spirit, that's when you create a lot of suffering. And you can see that today, that we have a deep mental health crisis. We have more anxiety, we have more depression, we have more of these things than ever, because we're kind of just like we're taking like we're say like you're a piece of you're a whole cake, and we're kind of just taking slices of ourselves, and we're calling that the whole cake. You see what I mean here? There are people who are just, no, I have a 9 to 5. I don't do that gym stuff. Or there are the people who, I'm not doing that. I do this, so I don't do that. You're kind of like, and this isn't entirely people's fault. This is kind of baked into our society now. Like look at school. School teaches you, look, dude, we're teaching you all this stuff, but you got to pick one thing. Even as early on, like freshman year, they're like, okay, what do you want to major in? AP Calculus, take that if you want to get into engineering or STEM. Or if you don't, if you were going to go into medicine after college, then you should probably take statistics. No, man, all that shit is valuable. Philosophy is valuable. All these history is valuable. Geopolitics is valuable. All these things, geography is valuable. All these things are necessary parts of becoming like a human with worldly knowledge. But you're taught from the very young age this thing of specialization, and not only does it seep into like your career and your the kind of hobbies, but it's literally baked into our psyche right now, into like I guess the memetics of our culture, where we have this like really deep specialization. I'm introverted. I got to be introverted, dude. And so what happens is you you stick to these labels of, oh, I'm introverted. I gotta play the part of introverted. So that means I'm shy. I don't ever talk to anyone. I struggle with being I don't know, social. When first of all, introverted doesn't really mean anything about your social skills. It just means that you have this kind of this tendency to like your kind of homeostasis place is just to not talk to people as much. That's it. That doesn't say anything about whether you have good social skills or not. Because I would actually consider myself a little closer on the introverted spectrum, even though I really enjoy being around people and having conversation. And I would say I get along with people. I don't usually have trouble with it. So these labeling, this toxic specialization has kind of seeped into our culture, and this kind of fracturing of ourselves, and it's making us fucking miserable. It's making us super fucking miserable. And I don't know what the solution. Actually, I do know the solution to that, and that is we need to start accepting these parts of ourselves, every single part of ourselves, and you can kind of see it too, where like if you talk about Jungian philosophy and the ego and the shadow, basically what we've created is we're all kind of creating these egos in our heads of what we think we need to be for a society, based on what society, based on what our parents, based on what we think is expected of us, and thus we create this like projection of this, and so it's like it's specialization at the deepest level, where you are pretty much it's not really about being living to your deepest truth. It's about living and being this kind of idea of what you think you want to be and what you think is acceptable, what you think is deemed acceptable by society. And what happens is you go your entire life wondering, man, is this it? Is this all I'm really meant to live up to? Is this all that I was meant to do? Because if you want to, you could die at your deathbed and really believe that, wow, I could have. There's so many more things that I should have done. And you have to begin. You have to begin by accepting, these things about yourself that you might not really are comfortable with, right? That maybe society, and it doesn't have to be like something, and it's not necessarily something kind of a quote unquote bad, like, oh, I have anger problems, and no, I don't have anger problems. I'm actually the nicest guy. How could I possibly get angry, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily negative. It could be things like, oh man, I'm really into Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and that's super nerdy, so I can't show that to people because that's super nerdy and people are going to think I'm weird. It is those things, it is those really interesting tidbits, those sprinkles around our personalities that we have that we are learning, whether that is like actively through society or that what we've kind of downloaded into our heads, the voices of our parents, of expectations of teachers, and all these sorts of things who are telling us to look, to do, and be a certain way. So we have that in our heads. And the first step to really getting out of this fucking trap is to start believing that, okay, look, I have all these different parts of myself, these intriguing parts of myself, and who there's no one else who's going to accept them except myself. There's no one else who can. So I think it starts with accepting these kind of multidimensional aspects of yourself, from loving Yu-Gi-Oh cards to go liking, I don't know, liking weird shit, like liking to, I don't dig out your nails with a pencil or something. I don't know. But and I think the most important thing here is actually just beginning to follow your curiosity again. Like, where you've probably gotten used to so long for just kind of pushing down the things that you actually want to pursue in favor of the things that you are expected to do and for your family or whatever the fuck it is, right? For example, I was expected to go to college. I didn't want to go to fucking college, but I went to college, to because my family was I was expected to. That was the expectation, and then I dropped out. And honestly, I don't regret not going to college. But if it was up to me, I wouldn't have gone to begin with, right? So it really comes back to what are the things that I'm interested in, what are the things I'm curious about. I think that is like the first step to really start getting yourself out of this whole, oh, I got to be a certain way. If you can let your curiosity be the compass, and you just if it's interesting to you, obviously it has to be ethical. Like you can't just get really curious about, ooh, like I don't know. It probably has to be like useful to you, and when I say useful, I mean enriching to you. It challenges you. It makes you a better person, not just necessarily watching hours of Netflix passively. If you're watching hours of Netflix because you want to get into writing and writing characters and you're studying all these hours of Netflix, that's that's one thing. But just binging Netflix mindlessly and not really doing anything to kind of cover up these negative feelings or something, that's another thing entirely. So really, like, follow curiosity. And there's a lot of talk about obsession and getting obsessed with things, and a lot of them are true. You do need obsession to really kind of towards certain things to be able to get really good at them. But you're not going to really, but to even create obsession to begin with, you need to have some sort of interest in them. And to develop any sort of interest in anything, well, you have to try it out first. And if you want to try stuff out, well, then you don't know what you want to try out until you start following your curiosity. And that has to be kind of like the compass, right? Follow your curiosity, and that's going to be the first step, getting the ball rolling on, okay, how do I start kind of molding myself or start accepting these multidimensional aspects of myself instead of just like, I'm introverted and I got to be in this one thing. Cool, man. Another YouTube video.